Welcome back. Next, let's talk about the physical geography of South America. And just as a broad overview, one thing about South America has a wide range of diverse types of environments, and it's primarily for two reasons. If you recall in the introductory lectures, we talked about what affects the climate of a place. The three things were latitude, position within a landmass, and elevation. And in terms of latitude, in other words, how far north and south you are, South America extends across a wide range of latitudes, from the hot tropical portion in the north to not too far, maybe 1,000 miles or less from Antarctica in the south. So in other words, the southern part of, well, much of South America is quite tropical. The very southern part is actually quite cold and close to Antarctica. The second factor is elevation, and this is because of the presence of the Andes Mountains. The Andes Mountains is the longest and one of the highest mountain chains in the world. Hopefully some of this will come across in the video that you should have watched on the Potosi mines and the Andes in the clip about rise of the continents in the Americas. The other important thing about the Andes Mountains is that it creates a rain shadow. A rain shadow is something we talked about in North America. However, for reasons we'll explain, the rain shadow in South America is quite different because of the direction of the winds. And one term I wanted to introduce here while we're talking about the Andes are antiplanos. And antiplanos are, this is one of our key terms, are high elevation valleys. And here's a picture of an antiplano. And one thing notable, these are high elevation valleys in the Andes. This is kind of what one looks like. You can see the peaks of the Andes in the background. These are really high elevation. They're also home to many indigenous societies. So for example, the Inca, much of the Inca Empire existed throughout these antiplano areas of the Andes. And if you watch the clip on the Potosi mines, if you watch that sort of region around where they were exploring the mining operations, that area was an antiplano as well. So that maybe gives you a good visual of what those look like. Okay, this is similar to a figure we saw in the previous lecture. So in Middle America, it's dry in the north. And as you get to the southern part of Middle America, in the Caribbean, it is tropical, and that extends down into South America, including this area here, which is generally the area of the Amazon basin. This is an area of tropical vegetation, including rainforest. But on the other side of the Andes here, in what's called the Atacama, this is a particularly dry environment. In fact, it is the driest environment on Earth. And we'll talk a little bit about why. And then as we get into the southern cone, the climates are quite moderate. In fact, the climates mirror a small version of what you might find in the United States. And we'll talk more about those when we get into the regional view of what's called the southern cone. But let's focus for a moment on these two major physical features in terms of vegetation. You have the tropical rainforest here, the Amazon, and then we have the Atacama, or dry area here, near northern Chile and southern Peru. And one thing I want to highlight is this is a figure showing different latitudes of the world. And generally speaking, when we talk about the tropics, it's a region of the world near the equator that doesn't have all four seasons. It stays really warm throughout the year, including sort of the southern half of Mexico, all the way down through, if you think of South America like an ice cream cone, the ice cream part would be in the tropics, and the cone would be in what we call the mid-latitudes. The mid-latitudes down here are a bit like the mid-latitudes in North America, what we experience. Okay, number one, let's talk about the Amazon basin and discuss a few elements of it. The Amazon basin is the largest rainforest region on Earth, and it's generally this area within the circle. It's mostly in Brazil, but not exclusively. A number of other countries have a portion of the Amazon basin or the Amazon rainforest as well, from Bolivia to Peru to Colombia through the Guyanas and up through Venezuela as well. This area in green is generally where we have the Amazon basin and the tropical rainforest. And rainforest also extends from Colombia into Central America. And on the other side of the Andes Mountains, that's what divides it here, we have a dry desert. I'm going to jump ahead here to show an image of the Amazon basin. You can see very dense vegetation because of the hot and wet environment, good growing conditions, densely vegetated, large trees with dense canopies. In fact, there is not just one layer of trees, there's multiple layers of trees. We call it a multi-layered canopy. And one thing about the Amazon to note is the high level of biological diversity. That in tropical rainforests overall, they only encompass about 7% of the land area on Earth, but they have over half of the species that live on Earth. So if we look at here, this is biodiversity, meaning the number of different species. You can see it is extremely high in this area here, which is the Amazon basin, because of that complex vegetation of the rainforest. This is an illustration of that multi-layered canopy. You have a ground layer of vegetation, an understory, the main canopy of trees, and even another set of trees that emerge through the canopy. And within all of these layers, there's also vines and insects and pollinators and a whole other host of animals that are associated with all of these different environments. A quick thing about tropical rainforests is that the surface soil in a tropical rainforest is rich with nutrients because the leaves are falling all year round. Again, you've got to remember, you're in the tropics, there's no seasons, but the leaves shed constantly at a steady rate. And that provides a lot of nutrients, but the nutrients is limited to the very surface of the rainforest. That's why these trees have these funky, long, wide roots. And they take up nutrients right from the forest floor. If you go underneath there, though, the soil is quite poor because of all the amount of rain that falls. It washes away nutrients, and plus all of the living things are really absorbing the nutrients before they can work their way into the soil. So if we look at two different soils, on the left here is a tropical soil, and you can see there's not much coloration. It has a sort of rusty color because of all the weathering. Weathering is something that happens when you have a wet environment. So it actually, the iron in the soil actually rusts. On the right is a mid-latitude soil in the Great Plains of the United States, and this dark layer is a lot of organic material that over the years has worked its way into the soil. You'll notice that dark layer is absent from the tropical soil. So a lot of attention has been paid lately to rainforest clearing. It had slowed down for a number of years, but it seems to be picking back up with a number of fires and a number of clearings. So let's talk about clearing in the rainforest. Clearing often happens for agricultural use, and it can happen in two ways. One is for subsistence agriculture. This has gone on for hundreds or thousands of years. As people have lived in the rainforest, they practice something called shifting cultivation, also known as slash and burn agriculture. The idea is that you remove a small plot of vegetation. The burning is that you burn the vegetation to add more nutrients for the soil, and then you can farm there for a short period of time. After maybe a few years, the soil is depleted, and then you have to move on and clear out another part of the rainforest. Now, if the clearing is small enough, this is a really low impact thing, that the rainforest will actually grow back and then and kind of swallow these holes back up over time. So as long as there's low population, which there is in the Amazon basin, there's a low impact by agriculture. In fact, there are people in the Amazon basin who are uncontacted people, or people who live without contact with the outside world. They're aware of the outside world. In fact, they're kind of looking at this helicopter, whatever's taking a picture of them. But particularly because of what happened during the Spanish colonial period, a lot of people just sort of chose to sort of keep to themselves in the rainforest and not interact with the outside world. Now, where you have much more heavy impacts on the rainforest are clearing for agricultural use. So large-scale commercial agriculture is often responsible for clearing large tracts of land, like in this photo. And this happens for cattle ranching, soybean farms. In Southeast Asia, there's a lot of palm oil plantations that are planted in rainforests, and that's starting to be the case in the Middle America and some in South America as well. But anyway, large-scale agriculture clears out areas that cannot be easily recovered. So if you recall from the lecture about different types of agriculture, you can see that finger of soybeans kind of poking up in there. And that's where you're losing a lot of the Amazon basin, is that it's an expansion of agriculture from agricultural areas into the rainforest lands. Cattle ranching, this is an area that was former rainforest that was cleared to be a cattle ranch. This is a time-lapse photo showing this sort of fishbone pattern is the clearing of vegetation in the Amazon from the 1980s to the kind of 2012. Now, the problem with the large clearing of agriculture like that, why it doesn't bounce back, is that it disrupts nutrient cycles. So when you have the trees there, the trees will actually give off moisture and then causing it to be a wetter environment, and they will recover that moisture, and you have this sort of loop of recycled rainfall. When you remove the vegetation, you break up that loop. Instead of the trees recovering the water and holding on to it, it runs off into streams and out into the Amazon River and into the ocean. And you lose that moisture in the environment. It's difficult for the trees to bounce back. If you watch the videos on Haiti for the Middle American realm, this sort of pattern here is what happened to Haiti and why it is mostly treeless. So this is because of disruption of water and nutrient cycles. It prevents regeneration of forest. And why is that a problem? Well, we lose not only a place that stores carbon, but we also lose the biodiversity. There are many unique species in rainforests. Many medicines have been developed from these different species. You might have species of trees and plants that are resistant to diseases and pests, and things that might be helpful to us in a changing world for us to have more resilient type of agriculture. Okay, a real quick thing on winds of the earth. You have sort of two primary wind systems in the world. The westerlies, and these are winds that sort of tend to blow from west to east, kind of like in this direction, like these arrows are going. And near the equator, we have what are called the trade winds. So in the tropics near the equator, the winds converge right around the equator, and they tend to blow from east to west. Now, the mid-latitudes is up where we are, like in California and the United States. So our wind tends to come from the Pacific Ocean. But if you're in South America, on the other hand, winds tend to blow in from the Atlantic Ocean in the opposite direction. Now, in the North American realm, we discussed about the rain shadow effect on the interior of North America. But what we didn't really mention is, well, why does the air have to be blowing that way? Well, it has to do with these are the westerly winds, that the wind is coming from west to east from the Pacific Ocean going over our Coast Range and the Sierra Nevada, causing a rain shadow in the interior of the United States. Now, one thing to bear in mind, though, in South America, the winds are going the opposite direction. So in South America, you have where the Amazon basin is not a rain shadow. In fact, that's the wet part. It is winds blowing in the opposite direction over the Amazon, then over the Andes. That causes a rain shadow on the opposite side of South America, on their coastal side. So while our coastal areas like Santa Cruz and Monterey are quite wet and green, the coastal areas of South America are extremely dry. And that's due to a rain shadow effect in this area here in red. This is called the Atacama, or technically the Atacama and Peruvian deserts along this little strip. And you have that rain shadow effect. You also have some other factors like cold water currents that help to keep storms away during the summer. And these are actually the driest. There are places in the Atacama that are considered the driest places on Earth where rain has never been recorded. So while you have the rainforest on one side, you have the extremely arid Atacama and Peruvian deserts on the other side. Here's a picture of the Atacama. You can see extremely dry environment, no vegetation to hardly find here, with the Andes in the background. And that's pretty much it. We will talk a little bit more about physical geography of some of the other subregions when we're going to actually break down a little bit of lecture by subregion, and we'll talk a little bit more about the more temperate areas like in the southern part of South America. So more later.